Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Buenos dias. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm gonna do this introduction in English, and I will try to speak slowly so that the translation, the settings, the subtitles, this whole thing works. My name is Nerea Bilbatua, and I work at Fundación Amaranta. It's a specialized NGO supporting women and girls who are victims or are at risk of human trafficking for all forms of exploitation in Spain. This webinar focuses on collaboration between specialized NGOs and law enforcement in the detection, identification, and referral of trafficking victims at Madrid Barajas Airport. The session is part of the REACH project. It's funded by the European Commission and led by IRC. The project REACH seeks to improve support and protection for migrant and refugee women who are victims or survivors of sexual violence linked to exploitation or trafficking in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. It does this by improving access to gender-sensitive support services, promoting multidisciplinary cooperation, providing training, and advocating for public policy improvements. Drawing on Fundación Amaranta's experience, this webinar presents the Spanish model of cooperation between specialized NGOs, law enforcement, and asylum authorities at the Madrid Barajas Airport. And in these next few hours, we will explore how this framework works in practice. We will highlight good practices, operational challenges as well, and lessons learned. And we hope that this might inspire similar initiatives and strengthen multi-agency cooperation across Europe. And before we dive into this issue and we continue, one technical note. The presentation will be recorded because it's linked to opening this meeting itself, but we will edit it later so that only the presentation and not the Q&A section can be shared later on. And without further ado, I now give the floor to my colleague, Marta González. She is the head of advocacy and awareness raising at Fundación Amaranta, and she will lead the next section. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nerea, for your introduction. I hope the translation is working well. If not, please write through the chat and my colleagues will help you. This first part, I will share it in English because, as said, this is a European project and many colleagues from different European countries are participating. The second part, my colleague Margarita Garcia will be sharing some examples and cases in Spanish, and we will use the subtitle translation. So let me share the screen with our presentation, the presentation we have prepared. I believe now it's working, right? Great. Thank you. Okay. So in this first part, I will briefly present the Spanish legal framework on trafficking in human beings, the main rights of the victims, and the specific role of specialized NGOs. This context is important to understand why collaboration at the airport is possible and what each actor is legally and practically supposed to do. In Spain, several key instruments structure the response to trafficking. First, the law on rights and freedoms of foreigners establishes a specific protection regime for undocumented migrants who are victims of trafficking. Second, the Framework Protocol for the Protection of Victims of Trafficking provides operational guidelines for detection, identification, support, and protection, and aims to improve coordination and cooperation between authorities and NGOs. Third, the Instruction 6/2016 of the Ministry of Interior specifically seeks to improve the actions of law enforcement against trafficking and explicitly strengthens cooperation with specialized NGOs during the identification and protection process. In parallel, the asylum law recognizes victims of trafficking as a particularly vulnerable group whose specific situation must be taken into account throughout the international protection procedure. Finally, the Barajas procedure, Barajas is the name of the Madrid airport, adopted in 2019 by the Ministry of Migration, Ministry of Equality, in collaboration with UNHCR and specialized anti-trafficking NGOs, establishes a referral mechanism at the Madrid airport for potential victims of trafficking who arrive to the airport seeking international protection. In the Spanish system, victims of trafficking have several important rights recognized. Detection can be carried out by any private person, NGO, civil servant, or public authority. Once signs are detected, the case should be referred to specialized anti-trafficking police whenever the victim is ready. Access to specialized support services is possible even before formal identification. It is enough that a specialized NGO has detected signs of trafficking for the person to be referred to safe accommodation and receive basic assistance, psychological and social support, and legal counseling. Formal identification is the responsibility of specialized police units in Spain. Identification must be based on reasonable grounds and indicators and cannot be conditioned on a complaint or cooperation by the victim. Identified foreign victims in an irregular situation can obtain a recovery and reflection period of at least 90 days, which can be renewed and during which protection and assistance should be guaranteed. After that period, they may choose between assisted voluntary return or a residence and work permit based on exceptional circumstances, based on two different and complementary paths, either because their collaboration with authorities or based on their personal situation as victims. We have these two possibilities in Spain. Importantly, the international protection procedure is compatible with the anti-trafficking framework, so a victim can complain asylum while also accessing the rights recognized as a victim of trafficking. Specialized NGOs play a central role within this framework in Spain. Foundation Amaranta, as well as other specialized NGOs, participate in the detection of possible cases, both through outreach work and by receiving referrals from other actors. We collaborate with the specialized law enforcement units during the formal identification process, being present during the interviews, providing information to the person, and issuing reports on indicators of trafficking and also on the victim's personal situation. We provide comprehensive support like safe accommodation, psychosocial and legal assistance, support with reintegration, and when appropriate, voluntary return. And we do this usually through a combination of public and private funding. We also support victims in accessing justice. For example, when people decide to cooperate with investigations or file complaints. And finally, the specialized NGOs are not only service providers, but we also analyze emerging trends. We monitor how regulations are implemented in practice, and we formulate proposals and recommendations to improve policies and procedures. Now let me now move to the specific context of the airport in Madrid. Madrid Barajas is a key European hub with a very high volume of passengers, connections, and transit routes. This makes it a strategic point both for traffickers and for early detection of potential victims. At the same time, it is a very complex environment with strict border control logic, limited time, restricted spaces, and multiple actors involved. The collaboration between specialized entities and law enforcement at the airport has therefore required time, advocacy, and the development of specific procedures that we will now share with you. Detecting trafficking cases at the airport is particularly challenging. In many cases, exploitation has not yet taken place, so victims do not identify themselves as such and may still trust their traffickers or the promises they have received. Border procedures are often urgent and fast, with a strong focus on migration control and security. There can be non-specialized or non-sensitive interpreters, mass arrivals and overload of staff, and physical infrastructures are not ideal for sensitive interviews. Spaces for interviews are often not adapted to privacy or trauma-informed approaches. All these elements make it more difficult to identify indicators of trafficking and to ensure that people understand their rights. At the airport, we see different scenarios in which trafficking can occur or be detected. Among travelers arriving from other European countries, there may be victims destined for exploitation in Spain or victims who have already been exploited elsewhere and are transferred to Spain, sometimes traveling with traffickers and sometimes alone. This happens also among travelers arriving from countries and crossing the external border. There are also people in transit to other countries who may be transferred by the traffickers to continue the exploitation in another EU member state or beyond. Another important group consists of people who apply for asylum upon arrival. Some have suffered exploitation and persecution in their countries of origin or in countries of transit and flee this situation seeking for protection. Others are transferred by traffickers and ask for asylum to seek help. And some of them may even request asylum under the control and the coercion and instruction of traffickers. We also see cases related to Dublin returns, where victims who have been exploited in other Schengen countries are returned to Spain as their first country of entry, as well as people traveling from Spain to other countries, either to continue their exploitation or to escape from trafficking. So all these scenarios are present, and we need to be able to detect and react to all these different kind of situations. Now, talking about the functions that security forces have at the airport. At the Madrid airport, the National Police, that's one of our main law enforcement agencies at state level, have several key functions. They are responsible for border control, general security at the airport and certain areas, and the management of asylum applications that are lodged at the border. Within the National Police, specialized anti-trafficking units The THB, the trafficking brigades, are in charge of investigating trafficking offenses and formally identifying victims. They are present at the airport, and when signs of trafficking are detected, they activate the collaboration with the specialized NGO on duty. This permanent presence of specialized units is not automatic. It is the result of good practice and sustained advocacy by NGOs and international organizations over time. The Civil Guard is also at national level, the second law enforcement agency in Spain, also plays an essential role at the airport. Its main responsibilities include customs, control of aircraft, and certain security functions. Within the Civil Guard, the Icaro Group is a specialized team operating in critical infrastructures, such as the airport. They work mainly in plain clothes without a uniform, and they focus on behavioral analysis to detect potential criminals. And lately, they have broadened their focus also to apply this focus on behavioral analysis to detect potential victims of crime and especially victims of trafficking. They observe physiological, verbal, and nonverbal indicators of risk, such as unusual nervousness or inconsistent stories, which may be linked to offenses like drug trafficking, terrorism, or trafficking in human beings. Icaro Group works in coordination with other specialized Civil Guard units on trafficking, and when they detect possible indicators of trafficking, they refer the case and activate the collaboration also with specialized NGOs. Given the very high number of people passing through the airport every day, this kind of behavioral screening is a valuable complement to traditional controls. The collaboration between law enforcement and NGOs that we have mentioned at the border is framed by the National Framework Protocol and the Instruction 6/2016 that we previously mentioned. These instruments aim to improve the operational coordination and the information exchange between police forces and specialized NGOs. They establish the figure of the national and regional social interlocutors as official contact points to ensure permanent communication between law enforcement and specialized NGOs. They also state that when there are reasonable grounds to believe that a person may be victim of trafficking, police units must ensure early identification and the immediate activation of protection mechanisms. In practice, this means that specialized NGOs should be able to actively collaborate in the formal identification, assessment, and referral, and that victims should have access to appropriate accommodation, medical and social assistance, and legal support without delay. The steps usually include the formal identification interview that is conducted by the specialized police with the collaboration of the NGO, the issuing of the police decision on the identification, the possibility for the NGO to issue also a report on the indicators we see and on the personal situation of the victim, and the subsequent decision by the government delegation on the recovery and reflection period. This is followed by the offer of resources and support by the NGO. The collaboration in the specific context of asylum applications at the border has evolved gradually through the advocacy with the Ministry of Inclusion and Migration and the Office of Asylum, and through strategic collaboration with UNHCR and between asylum specialized NGOs and anti-trafficking NGOs, we have been able to access airports to interview potential victims of trafficking identified during the asylum admission phase. Between 2016 and 2018, this access was occasional and informal. When the Asylum and Refugee Office detected signs during this international protection proceeding, they contacted our organization and we entered the airport to conduct the interviews and share our assessment. In 2019, when specialized police were not systematically attending the airport to identify potential victims among asylum applicants, and given the ministry is concerned about the signs of trafficking in women's asylum accounts, a formal procedure was promoted based on the experience of previous years. And this procedure was the Barajas procedure, and this has three main objectives. First is to ensure that the signs of trafficking are detected during asylum procedures at the airport and that the needs and risks are properly assessed so that those affected can be referred to appropriate reception centers within the asylum system. Second, to guarantee that specialized anti-trafficking entities can access the restricted areas and assess the cases and issue reports. And third, to ensure that the formal identification process established can be implemented in parallel when there are reasonable grounds to believe that someone may be victim of trafficking. This slide now explains how the Barajas procedure operates when indicators of THP appear during the international protection application at the airport. It highlights the coordination steps between authorities and specialized NGOs to ensure protection for potential victims. The procedure begins when authorities like the Asylum Police, Asylum Office, or UNHCR, as well as the NGOs present at the airport, detect possible signs of THP during an asylum application at the airport. Once these indicators are observed, the procedure is activated and relevant authorities and actors like specialized police and the NGOs that are on duty are immediately informed. Second, specialized NGOs such as Foundation Amaranta, APRAM, Diaconia, Foundation White Cross access the airport area where the person is staying and conduct an in-depth interview using the trauma-informed and gender-sensitive approach. The NGO staff assess the trafficking indicators and evaluates the person's needs and prepares a detailed report with conclusions and also proposed actions. And finally, the Asylum Office reviews this NGO report and decides whether or not to admit the case into the international protection procedure. The Ministry of Migration assigns the most appropriate protection resource under the international protection system based on the NGO's recommendations and also based on the consent and agreement of the presumed victim. And the NGO informs the person of their rights and available support options, including the specialized facilities for trafficking victims. If accepted, the person is admitted into the country and accompanied to a safe reception facility. This Barajas procedure helps ensure that trafficking indicators are not overlooked during airport asylum procedures. This coordinated model also strengthens the early identification and provides a safer, more proactive pathway for potential victims. Now, with this slide, we want to highlight the key impacts and good practices that have emerged from the coordinated work at the airport. As we said, since 2015, it has evolved and improved. These practices show how the collaboration, the training, and institutional commitment have strengthened the response to trafficking within border and international protection procedures. First, the strengthened collaboration and advocacy. One major achievement has been the close collaboration between trafficking specialized NGOs, asylum-focused NGOs, and UNHCR. Together, we have actively advocating for improving the detection of potential victims of trafficking at the border and during international protection procedures. This joint effort has also reinforced assistance and protection measures for potential victims within the international protection system. Second, the increased police involvement and presence. Another significant impact is the active involvement, as we said, of the police in implementing the framework protocol at the airport, something that did not happen automatically. It did not happen before. And with this advocacy, we also managed to focus on this importance and improve it. There is now a permanent police presence at the airport, the presence of a specialized police group on trafficking, ensuring that they can intervene in any type of trafficking-related case, not only in asylum applications, but also when the person is detected at a border control or in any other scenario or circumstance at the airport that we have previously explained. This constant presence strengthens the early identification, the coordination, and the immediate protection. Third, the development of the Barajas procedure that we have explained, the creation and the implementation of this procedure as a pilot project in Madrid to be extended also in other international airports in Spain, represents a major good practice in our point of view, since it provides a structured, coordinated, and victim-centered protocol for addressing trafficking indicators within airport procedures, assess the victim's needs, and decide which facilities, resources, shelters are the most appropriate within the international protection system. And fourth, the capacity building and the training. Training has been a crucial component of progress. The asylum office staff have, for example, received training through the collaboration between UNHCR and the Spanish Asylum Office with Foundation Amaranta and other specialized NGOs. The border police and the civil guard staff at the Madrid airport have also been trained to better identify trafficking indicators and respond appropriately and understand how they need to activate and refer the cases to the specialized police units at NGOs. These trainings have helped to ensure that frontline actors share the same understanding, tools, and approach when dealing with potential victims. And collectively, all these actions demonstrate, in our point of view, a clear improvement in coordination, detection, capacity, and victim-centered protection at the airport. Of course, a lot more needs to be improved, and we can improve it, the implementation better and coordination better, but it is a good step, a good improvement. And all these actions show how the multi-sector cooperation and collaboration and the continuous training translate into more effective safeguards for people at risk of trafficking. Still, as I said, we do have many challenges. Despite these advances, and one of the biggest challenges is the new European Pact on Asylum and Migration that places a strong emphasis on border procedures, accelerated decision-making, and returns. And this raises the question of how to coordinate all the systematized work on detection and protection at Barajas Airport with the commitments and responsibilities that the pact assigns to member states regarding screening and identification of particularly vulnerable persons at the border. There is, in our point of view, a real risk that pressure for speed and efficiency in border procedures may reduce the time and space needed to identify victims of trafficking and to ensure they can access protection. One of our key concerns is how to maintain and strengthen a victim-centered, gender-sensitive approach in this new context. And Foundation Amaranta, as part of the Spanish Network Against Trafficking, together with other specialized NGOs, is right now lobbying and advocating and also sharing recommendations and proposals with our government in order to implement the European Pact on Asylum and Migration, taking into account of all these needs and protection that potential victims of trafficking have, and to incorporate all these good practices in the implementation also of the EU Pact at the border. Okay. So I pass the floor again to Nerea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. After this section, we will move to the next part of the seminar, and we will look at real cases that show how this collaboration that Marta has explained worked in practice at the Madrid Barajas Airport. And with these cases, we want to illustrate how law enforcement, asylum authorities, and specialized NGOs work together to detect, as Marta was explaining, trafficking indicators, identify victims, and ensure their protection and support. These examples that you will see now cover different trafficking situations. Victims that are in transit through the Barajas Airport, victims arriving to the airport to be exploited in Spain, victims who also apply for asylum, and victims exploited in Spain who are being transferred to other countries. This section now will be led by my colleague, Margarita Garcia, and held in Spanish. So please adjust your translation settings if you need so that the spoken language should be Spanish now. You have the instructions in different languages in the chat. They were posted earlier, but we can repost it again if you need so. We give you 1 minute to adjust the settings if you need so, and then Margarita, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Espera un poquito para que
Margarita,
empiece.
¿compartes tú la pantalla o quieres que la compartamos?
No, la puedo compartir yo si quieres, sí. O bueno, Marta, está bien que la compartas, así puedo ver al mismo tiempo. Sí, está bien.
Vale, dame un momento.
Vale.
Cuando me digas, voy pasando a la siguiente, Marga.
Bueno, yo creo que a lo mejor ya está todo el mundo preparado con los subtítulos.
Sí, yo creo que
Vale,
puedes seguir, Marta.
muy bien. Pues primera diapositiva. El primer caso que tenemos es el de una mujer víctima de trata de seres humanos en tránsito en España. Ujú. Se trata de una mujer de 26 años, nacional de Zimbabue, que se encuentra en situación de vulnerabilidad. Fue reclutada por un hombre y sometida a trata con fines de explotación sexual y explotación en actividades delictivas. Durante 9 años fue trasladada por distintos países. Durante uno de los traslados a Colombia, realizó una escala en España y solicitó ayuda a la policía de frontera. La policía de frontera derivó el caso a la policía especializada en trata de seres humanos. Se activó el protocolo marco y Fundación Amaranta, como organización especializada, participó en la entrevista de identificación junto con la policía especializada en trata. La mujer fue identificada como víctima de trata de seres humanos y se le concedió el periodo de restablecimiento y reflexión. Se aplicó en este caso la cláusula de no sanción. Aceptó el apoyo integral que se le ofreció desde la Fundación Amaranta e ingresó en el recurso de acogida para ser acompañada en su proceso de recuperación. Como vemos en este caso, la mujer solicita ayuda en frontera. Esto no es muy común, no es algo que solamos encontrarnos. Y la policía, al ver signos de trata, solicita la intervención de los del grupo especializado en trata y de esta manera se activa el protocolo marco en la instrucción 6/2016. En este marco avisan a la Fundación Amaranta que como entidad especializada acompaña a la víctima en todo este proceso de identificación. Vemos que la persona es, por tanto, al ser identificada como víctima de trata, por la Policía Nacional, puede entrar en territorio español y desde la Fundación le podemos ofrecer los recursos. En este caso es relevante destacar que al ser un caso de explotación sexual y de comisión de actividades delictivas, se le aplica la cláusula de no imposición de penas y castigos. El siguiente caso que tenemos es de una mujer víctima de trata en España. Se trata de una mujer de 22 años con 2 hijos en su país de origen y en situación de desempleo. Un familiar le ofrece la posibilidad de viajar a España y ganar mucho dinero trabajando como escort. Su familiar le dice que ella se hará cargo de todas las gestiones del viaje y de todos los gastos. Acuerdan que cuando comience a trabajar y comience a ganar dinero, le pagará todos los gastos que ha cometido por el viaje, pero no le especifica el importe de la deuda. A su llegada al aeropuerto de Madrid, el grupo Ícaro de la Guardia Civil detecta irregularidades en el comportamiento y en el relato de la joven y contacta con Fundación Amaranta. En esta entrevista le advertimos a la mujer de que podría enfrentarse a una situación de trata si continúa su viaje. Pero ella manifiesta que confía en su familiar y decide continuar el viaje. Le trasladamos información sobre nuestro número de teléfono y el grupo Ícaro de la Guardia Civil le da también su contacto. Poco después de llegar a su destino, la mujer se pone en contacto con nosotras porque detecta que ha sido engañada, que las condiciones prometidas no son reales y se está enfrentando a una situación de explotación. Nos contacta a través del teléfono 24 horas y nos solicita ayuda. Para esto nos coordinamos de nuevo con la Guardia Civil para ayudar a la mujer a salir de la situación de explotación. Posteriormente, con esta labor de coordinación, la mujer ingresa en nuestro recurso de acogida y comienza con un programa de recuperación. En este caso, la mujer pasa la frontera sin ningún problema y los actores que intervienen son el grupo Ícaro de la Guardia Civil, que observa en su comportamiento y en el relato indicios de trata, y es cuando nos avisan. Nosotras desde la Fundación Amaranta le advertimos de los riesgos a los que creemos que puede estar expuesta si continúa el viaje, pero ella confía en su familiar, continúa, pero es importante que tenemos la oportunidad de advertirle de los riesgos, de informarle sobre sus derechos y opciones y de generar un mínimo vínculo de confianza para que en el momento en el que se encuentra en una situación de riesgo y se da cuenta de que ha sido engañada, ella nos llama para solicitar ayuda. El tercer caso que tenemos es el de una mujer víctima de trata en España y solicitante de protección internacional. Es una mujer de 22 años, originaria de Camerún, que a los 17 años fue obligada a contraer matrimonio en contra de su voluntad. Para huir de este matrimonio forzado, un hombre le ofrece viajar a Europa y trabajar como peluquera. Ella acepta y el hombre se encarga de todos los preparativos del viaje, la obtención del pasaporte, la compra del billete de avión y la acompaña durante todo el trayecto. A su llegada al aeropuerto de Barajas, el hombre le indica que tiene que actuar como si no le conociera y que solicite protección internacional alegando, contando que ha sido sometida a matrimonio forzado. La mujer solicita protección internacional en el aeropuerto y la Oficina de Asilo y Refugio que ve que ha sido víctima de violencia de género, pero también detecta indicios de un delito de trata de seres humanos. Detecta en la entrevista pues, mucho nerviosismo, contradicciones en el relato y lagunas, ¿vale? Y comunica el caso a la policía especializada. Se activa, por tanto, el protocolo marco y el procedimiento de Barajas para identificar a la posible existencia de indicios de trata. La Fundación Amaranta interviene en este caso como organización también especializada. La policía en este caso no la identifica como víctima de trata de seres humanos, pero la Oficina de Asilo y Refugio admite a trámite su solicitud de asilo porque considera que efectivamente la mujer puede estar en riesgo en su país de origen por violencia de género y posibles indicios de trata en base a la entrevista que mantiene con ella y también a un informe emitido por la Fundación Amaranta. La Fundación, una vez que es admitida a trámite, le ofrece apoyo integral en nuestro recurso para solicitantes de protección internacional. En este caso, como vemos, actúan varios actores. Está la Oficina de Asilo y Refugio para valorar la admisión o no a trámite de la solicitud de asilo en base al riesgo que puede tener la mujer en su país de origen, ¿vale? Y la policía también interviene, la policía especializada en trata. Ambos sistemas de protección se pueden activar en paralelo. Aunque la Policía Nacional no identifica formalmente a la mujer, ella pudo entrar en territorio porque la Oficina de Asilo sí consideró que había necesidad de protección por el matrimonio forzado y por la posible situación de riesgo por los indicios de trata detectados. La mujer fue, por tanto, acogida en plaza especializada de trata y asilo dentro de nuestra entidad. Y el último caso que tenemos es el de una mujer víctima de trata de seres humanos, explotada en España y trasladada por el tratante a otro país de la Unión Europea. Se trata de una mujer de 24 años, de nacionalidad colombiana, que fue explotada en España. El tratante la traslada, una vez que ha sido explotada en España, la traslada al aeropuerto para enviarla a otro país de la Unión Europea con el fin de continuar la explotación allí. En el aeropuerto, la mujer logra escapar del control del tratante y solicita ayuda en el puesto policial del aeropuerto. Desde aquí detectan que puede haber indicios de trata y solicitan la intervención de la policía especializada en trata que activa el protocolo marco y la instrucción 6/2016. La mujer decide colaborar con la policía poniendo una denuncia contra el tratante y la fundación participa en este proceso de identificación y de denuncia acompañando a la mujer. Una vez que se ven los indicios de trata, la Fundación Amaranta le ofrece acogida para ingresar en el recurso de recuperación. En este caso vemos que la explotación se ha producido en España y que los actores que intervienen son Policía Nacional, que deriva el caso al grupo especializado de trata para que la acompañe en este proceso de denuncia y de identificación. Bueno, serían estos los 4 casos y ahora pues se abriría el turno de preguntas o de dudas que puedan surgir después de estas intervenciones. Muchas gracias.